we're going to be talking about Zak Bagans' documentary called Demon House. And this documentary is based off of the Ammons Family Haunting, which I covered a couple weeks ago, so if you haven't watched that video, I would highly suggest going back and watching it and then coming back here, and then we can talk. What is the Demon House documentary? Well, basically, Zak Bagans heard about the Ammons Family Haunting, and he couldn't resist. He had to get in contact with them. Not only that, he decided he was going to go down to Gary, Indiana, and he was going to investigate himself. Not only investigate, he was going to buy the house. And if you know anything about Zak Bagans, you know he loves to buy things because he can. I mean, that's what it seems like sometimes. Why would you want to buy this house? Why wouldn't you just want to do an investigation? You know what I mean? What's the big frickin' deal? So before this documentary even starts, there is an actual warning label, and this put me at a little unease. I remember the first time watching it, I was like, do we want to take any chances here? The disclaimer reads, demonologists believe that demons can attach themselves to you through other people, objects, and electronic devices. View at your own risk. Do we want to watch this movie? Do you even want to hear the story through YouTube? Like, do you believe that things can attach to you through electronic devices? I don't know how I feel about it. Zak, old Z-Bags, he's investigated at this point over 1,000 hauntings. And he claims that this is the one haunting out of everything that he's ever done that really fucked him up. That says a lot. But he's also really good at capturing us and pulling us in. But he says, this is the haunting that really fucked me up. Well, what happened? It took them over 3 years to make this documentary. And over those 3 years, crew members quit. Some went to the hospital. The question here is, did they fall victim to the forces at play in this home? The very forces that possessed a little boy and terrorized a whole family to the point that they don't want to talk about it. I'm going to break this documentary down for you. But if you haven't seen it, please treat yourself and take the time to go and watch it. It's filled with photo and video evidence of everything that went down. It's got interviews with witnesses that were actually there when this all happened. And these witness testimonies really just solidify this seemingly unbelievable story. But wait. Before you go watch it, you're not going to want to miss this ASMR retelling. So grab your biggest cup of your hottest tea. And let's get into it. We're going to go back in time. We're going all the way back to 2014. What were you doing in 2014? Well, here's what Zak was doing. Zak wakes up from this nightmare. And in this nightmare, he encounters this large, terrifying demon. This demon is like, he explains like what I imagine like this big, giant, muscular, dark body and a goat's head. And he said that this creature came up to him and he was frozen. He couldn't do anything. And it breathed this black smoke into his lungs. And when Zak woke up, his throat like physically hurt. And he knew that this wasn't just a dream, like this meant something. Have you ever had a dream when you could do anything? Have you ever had a dream and you know that this is not just your mind going through the motions? You know that this dream is either a visitation or a message, or like it's more than just a dream. It's vivid, it leaves you feeling uncomfortable. which there's impulsive feelings, but sometimes when it has to do with stuff that's paranormal, it just makes you wonder if there's more at play than just obsessive impulse feelings. Zak gets to the house in all its glory, and when he arrives to the house, he gets a text message from his friend, a psychic named Chris Fleming. And Chris Fleming is warning him pretty sternly about this place, just to be cautious. And he shows a screenshot of this text message, and because I'm nosy AF, I was like, let's see what it says. So I'm gonna tell you because I wrote it all down. Okay, this is me as Chris Fleming. Hey bro, I hope you're alright and not possessed already. Just got off the phone with Adam Bly. Be safe. I saw visions of this demon being very, very large. Almost like a hulking type figure. Horns turned to black and centaurian feet. Be careful. Adam thinks it's like an 8 out of 10 on the demonic scale, below Satan himself. When it comes to possession, like one of the generals. I could send you a picture, or I could draw if you want me to, but it actually makes me feel really sick and weak. It's not your average. But then it cuts off. As Zak says, though, what's kind of crazy is that he never told anyone about his dream. And what Chris Fleming was describing was exactly what Zak saw in his dream. What are the odds that he would be describing the very thing that Zak saw? Zak tries to reach out to the family because, of course, he wants to interview them, and they were really leery. And the conversations went back and forth for a while, and eventually they just stopped responding to him. But if you know anything about Zak, you know that he does not take no for an answer. He is a persistent guy. I mean, at least when it comes to the paranormal. So in a last-ditch effort, they head to the family's new residence to attempt contact. Now, Zak was not given their address by the family. He had his team snooping around the internet, deep diving, and they deep dived so deep that they found it. So imagine you're the family, you're sitting at home watching your favorite TV show, I don't know, Rock of Love, something like that, and all of a sudden, the doorbell rings. You look through the people, and you're like, God dang it. What? Who is it? Oh, it's fucking Zak Bagans. What the fuck? You can't make this up. So, if you were the family, how would you feel? Wouldn't that upset you? I feel like it would upset me. So, they were still like, no, we don't want to talk to him. So, they sent the brother out. This is Uncle Kevin. So, Kevin answers the door, and he's like, no, they don't want to talk. And Zak's like, oh, why not? Da da da. They just don't want to be in the documentary. And Uncle Kevin's like, they want nothing to do with the documentary. And they didn't want anything to do with Zak either, because Zak at this point had already gone to the house, and the family didn't want anything that had maybe attached to Zak to accompany him into their house. Now, they just got rid of this. The story is crazy. I wouldn't want this crap in my place either. Luckily for Zak, Uncle Kevin did agree to go and do an interview with him. So he was going to get something from someone close to the family. So Uncle Kevin hops in Zak's car. They go to cruise around as Zak starts asking him questions. And Uncle Kevin says, look, whatever was in that house really terrorized my sister and the kids especially. They didn't even want me going in the house. At one point, his sister and the kids came to stay with him because it had gotten so bad. And that night, he could hear it attacking his nephew in the other room. He doesn't elaborate on what happened, but I would like to know what he means by it. He said there was another instance where obvious this was not them. And he was just floored, like, what was going on with them? He knew that something else was going on. As the documentary goes on, Zak goes on to interview several of our other known characters from the story. He interviews Father Michael Maginot, the priest that was there and performed the exorcisms on LaToya and her kids, and he interviewed the family case manager, Valerie Washington. Yeah, he got an interview with Valerie Washington. Remember, she dipped out of there. She had wanted nothing to do with this. He also interviewed Captain Charles Austin, the local police captain who was there on the scene and witnessed some crazy stuff. He was there for the house checks. When Zak interviews the family case manager, Valerie still stands firmly by what she saw, but at the same time, she did not want to go too deep into it because she didn't really want to revisit those memories. It was traumatizing. Who would want to relive that shit? Kids walking up walls, what the? No. She says to Zak, like, I saw him walk up the wall with my own eyes. Minutes later, he didn't remember a thing, and he was looking at us like we were crazy. And she ends her interview with Zak saying that there was something going on out there. It was out of the realm of a normal living person. I can't explain it. And then she says, if you feed it, it will bother you. If you feed it. And I know exactly what she means. Giving it the energy, giving it the attention. And that honestly freaks me out a little bit. A lot of it. If you feed it, it will bother you. I don't want to feed this thing anything. Zak talks to Father Maginot, and Father Maginot had a lot to say. He starts to talk about how when he was performing one of the exorcisms on LaToya, at the same time the police were investigating the basement, and they began to dig up the dirt under the stairs, and they found those items under the stairs. And in Father Maginot's opinion, he said it was kind of like he thought that these things were buried because they were part of some sort of ritual. Remember, it was like a nail, like a fingernail, pieces of these socks, like a pin, and like, I don't know, it seems like stuff that could have fallen under the stairs, but it doesn't explain why just under the stairs is dirt. But Father Maginot seemed to think that these were ritualistic items, especially because they weren't just laying on the surface of the dirt, they were under, like inside the dirt, buried in the dirt. He also thought that these items could be something that was used in necromancy, which, if you don't know what necromancy is, it's used when you're attempting to communicate with the dead, so maybe someone was trying to open up a portal down there. So as Zak starts to go through all the family members, a big question comes up, and Zak starts to wonder, was this whole thing even legitimate? Zak gets a call while he's doing this documentary from the producer of what he says is a very big horror film, and this producer was threatening him because the producer wanted the rights to the Ammons family story. And the voicemail that Zak plays in the documentary sounds like it's like an attorney on the phone, and Zak only plays like a little bit of this conversation, and what this guy says, this attorney says, what I assume is an attorney: Zak, your contract was unenforceable. What I am telling you is that Father Mike still is under the belief that he only granted you documentary rights. Number one, that Father Maginot is under the belief that he only granted you documentary rights. So I also wonder, what happened here? Who threw the first stone? was there a point that, like, who said, like, Father Mashno, you can't talk to other people about this? Because I am starting to wonder, hearing about Zak's alleged track record with kind of keeping things to himself, keeping networks to himself and things of the like. Maybe when Zak was being threatened by these attorneys, maybe he began to try to see if he could keep people like Father Machino in a contract where they could not help or talk to these movie producers. These are just thoughts. I don't know anything for certain. So this is where Zak starts to kind of believe, like, oh, like, there's no way that family would actually not want to talk to me about this. It's probably because Hollywood is giving them money, and now that they are going to make a movie deal, they don't want to talk to me because they can't. That's what he thinks. And at this point, too, it seemed that others who had talked with Zak were wanting to either recant or limit what Zak was able to share in the documentary. It goes back to when Zak is at the Ammons family home, and Zak is talking to the family, and Zak claims before he goes to talk to the family, like, oh, that they're talking about a movie deal. You hear Uncle Kevin say they don't want anything to do with the documentary, and Zak asks, are they doing something else with another movie producer? Uncle Kevin says yes, they are, and Zak goes, oh, okay. Like a little kid with his tail between his legs, a little dog with his tail between his legs. My thought here is, was Zak actually just butthurt that he couldn't get the interview? So his only possible way to retaliate was to suggest the possibility that they were attempting to amp the situation up just for money and a movie deal. What do you think? And Zak starts to go into people that didn't really believe what was going on. The original landlord, Charles Reed, and who's also the guy that sold the property to Zak, said that he was a skeptic of the entire thing. And when Zak arrived at the house, there were squatters there, and the squatters said they had not experienced anything weird in the time period that they were squatting in the house. Another neighbor who was very skeptical seemed to think that it was all about the money. Some of the Ammons family's own family members were appalled at the entire story, and they couldn't believe that the family would carry on like this, and they were just frankly embarrassed. So Zak has the house inspected for mold and gas leaks of the like, and they find maybe like a little bit in the attic, but not much. There was maybe a possibility of a small gas leak from the appliances or chimney that could maybe cause hallucination or other paranormal like experience, but not likely. Like, did the family wholeheartedly believe this to be true? Or was it just the result of some gas leak, some mold? Or was there really something sinister lurking in the shadows of this home? Well, the word must have spread, because one day while they were filming, a woman and her 3 kids stopped by. This woman was a previous resident of the house. She lived there in the 90s for about 4 to 5 years. Zak asks them if they want to come in, but he did preface, this place could be really dangerous. Like, are you sure you want to come in? Like, there is a chance that you could get possessed. And they were like, yeah. So look, he gave them a warning. Mika is the mom that used to live in this house, and she said that her friend used to tell her that she would hear footsteps in the house, and her friend like never liked going in the basement, and actually Mika didn't really like going in the basement either, but she did agree to go down there with Zak. While they're in the basement, there's a point where Mika, you see her leg, like her knee go out from behind her, and she thought that one of her kids kicks her, but no one did, and you see her demeanor start to change. She starts to get irritable, she starts to get angry, and Mika then starts to tell a really sad story. is asking Zak like a ton of questions. She's very inquisitive, very intrigued by the whole thing. And as time goes on, as he's showing them around the house, you notice her demeanor also begin to change. Her innocent questions turn to have a little more of a darker tone. And she becomes more reserved and guarded in her body language. She starts to also kind of like stare into space. It's almost like she's like really deep in her thoughts, or she was just somewhere completely different in her mind and kind of running on autopilot. Like she was talking, but there was no one home behind her eyes. At one point, Mika's mic picks up an EVP of a woman, and it clear as day sounds like someone saying, "Run, LaToya." And you see in the video that like Mika's mouth's not moving. Like it's really weird. In this house, the EVPs sound more like human voices than like the normal whispery, creepy stuff that we're used to hearing. And the voice also didn't match the voices of the kids that were with her. Mika and her kids go to leave the house, and as they're leaving, her son asks Zak, "Are the ghosts gonna follow us home? Because I'm scared." And I felt really bad for him, because you just know at this point, we're gonna hear back from them. We don't want to, but we feel like we're going to, and we do. A religious altar is set up in the living room, and Zak becomes more aggressive. The energy is starting to really ramp up, and he gets confrontational with his cameraman, Jay Wasley. He puts his hands on him at one point, and he starts yelling at Jay, and he's like, "Get out, get the fuck out." Like, I think it's like he thought he was Susie from Curb Your Enthusiasm. If you watch that show, she's always like, "Get out, get the fuck out." That's what Zak was doing. He starts to get weird and defensive and possessive of the house, and everyone's just like, I mean, it's normal for Zak, I guess. They don't seem super surprised, but they're like, we just need to get him out. So Billy is able to pry him away, and they go to take a drive. And it's not long after they leave the house that Zak gets a call from a neighbor that someone was on the front porch of the house trying to break in. So they head back, and by the time they get back, the local police were on the scene. The funny thing is, the police did not want to go into the house. They're like, "No, I don't want something attaching itself to me. I know about this house." One of the officers says, "Oh, if you want to read it, there's a 5-page police report on the house. Like, you need to just tear that thing down. You just need to tear that thing down." A series of unfortunate events is tied to this home after people visit it. We've talked about this in the other episode, but within 30 days of visiting the house, the CPS worker that was covering for our girl Valerie Washington sustained multiple injuries from miscellaneous accidents, including broken bones and burns. The home inspector that came to see if there was any mold in the house, well, a tree almost fell on him on his drive home. And then he was choked by an unseen force when he was sleeping. And this may not be correlated, but soon after, he developed cancer. Yeah, a series of unfortunate events. And it continues. It's almost like everyone that goes to this place kind of becomes cursed. February 20th of 2014, Zak gets a call from our girl Mika, and she is freaking out. Her daughter had attempted to unalive herself by overdosing on medication and harming herself with a sharp object. This was not like her daughter, which we hear in the story over and over. This is not like was just a few weeks before. She barely remembered, so I wonder if the point in the basement where you notice that she's drifting off, maybe something had started to take a hold of her. Her daughter says she didn't know where this anger came from on the night that she hurt herself and threatened to unalive her mother in her sleep. Yeah, they left that out. She threatened to also unalive her mom. So the night that all of this went down, she was taken to the hospital, and her family said that 6 scratch marks were carved into her back, and they have a picture. That's not good. It looked like someone legit just scratched them into her skin. Father Machino says we need to perform an exorcism on Mika's daughter, and they record it, which also is should it have been recorded? I don't know. I really don't know. But during the exorcism, you can see that Mika's daughter appears uncomfortable. Her eyes start to tear up, and at some point her head just drops. She goes completely unconscious, but she's sitting straight up. And Father Machino said that he believed, okay, that was the point where whatever spirit was attached to her finally left. Unfortunately, news of what happened to Mika's daughter hit the news media and began to circulate. And at this point, Zak gets a call from his dear friend Debbie Constantino. She's on some of the episodes of Ghost Adventures. Debbie wants to help, so she tells Zak that she attempted to make contact with the demon remotely, and she believes that she was successful in making that contact. Why? Oh, there's a crack in my ceiling. That's just great. Debbie says that she captures this EVP that sounds like a man saying something's wrong. Now, just a few months following her believed contact, Debbie and her roommate were both unalived in a double homicide and then self-unaliving at the hands of her own husband. Yeah, it hit Zak hard. I feel like he even has something in his museum kind of dedicated to her. This was a good friend of his. And actually, I think both her and her husband were on some of the Ghost Adventure shows. And I don't know their relationship, but I would dare to say that that is probably out of the ordinary. They don't elaborate on it, and they don't really go into it aside from that. The town of Gary, Indiana itself is no stranger to tragedy. The crime rates here are sadly high, and the percentage of citizens living under the poverty line is unfortunately high as well. One of the neighbors told Zak that a total of 5 people had died while living in that house, including a little boy who died in the back bedroom that exists downstairs in the basement. Do you remember the story about Mika's brother? Maybe I didn't tell you. Mika's brother lived in the room that's off of the basement. You'd go into the basement and there's a room down there, and that's where Mika's brother lived. And if you remember from the story, LaToya's youngest son would shut himself in the closet and would talk to a little boy that was not there. It's all coming together. There's some, in my brain, I think something's emanating from that back room. In comes Dr. Barry Taff. This guy has a doctorate in psychopsychology. He has a minor in biomedical engineering, and he's conducted over 4,500 investigations, including the famous entity case from 1974, which maybe we should cover that one next. He wanted to test the theory that perhaps high levels of man-made electromagnetic or earth-made geomagnetic energy could be the cause of the perceived paranormal events in the house. So he used this little device to measure the Earth's magnetic field, so we could see what's coming up from the ground and around and under the house, but the measurements came in at a pretty normal frequency. They go into the basement, whenever it is more life. And he says, it's transient in nature. I don't like that. I don't like that because that means it can move. That gives it like a little bit of an identity. I don't like it. While Dr. Taff is moving around the basement, Zak at one point tries to like leave the room, but he stops in his tracks. Like, he turns around. He's like really weird. He's acting really weird all of a sudden, and he's almost like an evil villain from an old black and white horror movie. And he starts to get emotional and then aggressive. And he said at this point, like, his eyes and his head start to hurt. And Dr. Barry Taff tells him, your body is a capacitor. It's being charged up from this environment, and you are discharging it. And then he starts holding his equipment up to Zak, and it starts spiking. So maybe Zak isn't full of crap when he says that, oh, it's like taking over me. Like, maybe he isn't full of complete crap. What else would cause it to spike? And then it starts to get a little chaotic. So Dr. Taff's back is turned to Zak, and Zak makes this like lunging motion at him. And you're just like, calm down, Zak, calm down. After he makes this motion, he walks away. And Dr. Taff was like, hey, is there a dog? Do the neighbors have a dog? I just heard a growth. And he points at a dark corner of the room. That's crazy because LaToya's mom used to claim to hear a dog in their house on many occasions. The puzzle pieces, they're coming together, you guys. But then something comes over Dr. Taff, and he's a learned doctor, and all of a sudden he's acting kind of weird, really confused. It's like he's not all there. It's not like him. Almost like Mika's daughter, just lost in his thoughts. So they get him out of the basement. And while they're walking around the house upstairs, they catch on camera the doctor is walking into one of the bedrooms. And as he walks past the bathroom, you see this mass from the bathroom follow him. And Dr. Taff turns around. He comes back and he puts his hand on the doorway of the bathroom, right where this thing came out of. He looks in the bathroom and he goes, yeah, it's bad energy in there. Same sense of nausea. And he walks away. After all of this happens, and Dr. Taff leaves, one of Zak's camera guys starts to feel really sick. His name is Adam. He starts laying down on the floor in the living room, and then at one point he slinks away by himself into the basement. It looks like he's almost sleepwalking in the footage. A total, just catatonic sleepwalk. They find him in the basement, laying on his back, in that creepy room. In the creepy room, I told you guys, in the creepy room. So they get him out, and they all go back to the hotel. Then when they're back at the hotel, things start to get really bad. Adam starts throwing up blood in Zak's bathroom. He starts to scream at Zak in a voice that is not his. And they capture him on camera. And you don't want to miss seeing this. You have to see the scene. It is weird. It is bizarre. If it's acting, it's some of the best acting I've ever seen. All of the guys are at like one end of the hallway while he's yelling and screaming at the other end of the hallway. And you can tell they're like, what do we do? And they said something about like security's coming. Like they didn't even want to get near him. They had like 1 foot towards him and 1 foot ready to run away. He's banging on doors. He's yelling obscenities at something that's like not there. Adam is screaming that this thing is messing with him, and he's challenging it, taunting it, and like we've heard over and over, they have never seen him like Zak still had not told anyone about his dream before all of this started. And you kind of hear like they're recording this from under the table, so clearly he didn't want this to be recorded at the time. Adam says, "Yo, it doesn't want me." One of the other guys, "It wants him." "Yeah, it wants you." Looks right at Zak. The next day, he tells Zak to go to the bathroom of the house and smash the mirror and cut his throat with it. So whatever it was that was bugging him is still bugging him. And Zak at this point has to let him go from the crew because this guy's off his freaking rocker. You can't let him back. They try to get him help and he refuses. This same night, Dr. Taff is only 2 floors above them at the hotel, and he's having his own weird experience. He has this like uneasy anxiety, and he said he hears this loud bell sound, and when he hears it, he hits the floor, just faints. And when he comes to, he has blood in both of his ears. And Dr. Taff returns home, and then his organs begin shutting down one by one, and doctors cannot explain the cause. Dr. Taff is without words. He says that like this whole thing was life-changing. I never thought something like this would happen to me. There's no explanation. So now, Zak is ready to experiment on the house. They go and do the full lockdown. They board up all the house, like they board up all of the doors, they board up all of the windows, so that Zak can be sealed up to fully investigate by himself. And I am actually really surprised by this because I feel like I don't remember him doing too much completely alone, and I'm positive that after this, he doesn't ever do anything alone, and I feel like after this documentary is when Zak became a little more standoffish in the investigations, a little more like throwing Aaron and Billy and all of the guys into the fire before he would go in himself. But I also give him kudos for this, like going to this place alone. Like, with everything, I couldn't do it. And for someone who has gone lights out numerous times, he says that this time he doesn't want to, and it takes him a while before he gathers up the cojones to shut all the lights off. Could you do it? You can feel Zak's uneasiness as the hours slowly tick by. They catch an EVP of a distant female voice. Again, not whispering, just a voice. "That's my baby." Always audible voices. I've never seen anything like it unless they're just pulling our legs. Around 4:51 a.m., Zak wakes up to the sound of footsteps in the house, possibly coming up from the basement. But then you hear a low groan, this animalistic sound of like a sheep, dog, lion thing. And Zak freaks out. He's like, "Get away from me! Back the fuck up!" The camera that he has is sitting on the bed next to him, completely out of focus, but it does capture a dark picture, like a dark figure coming towards the camera. You see that something comes into the house, and he like tries to get the F out of there. He's like, "Get me out of this house." So, and they get him out. They end the investigation. Well, the next day, his eyes begin to cross, giving Zak double vision. He goes to the doctors and is diagnosed with a serious eye condition called diplopia. He underwent tons of tests with different doctors, and wears those giant glasses now. The condition that he had, this condition that came on, it's permanent. And that's why now Zak has these big old honkin' like glasses like the old man from Up. What did he see? Was it staged? I don't think that would be a really big commitment to stage. In the aftermath of all of this, let me give you a little update on everyone. Uncle Kevin was kicked out of his family's house because they claimed that something dark transferred from Zak onto him. Adam, the camera guy, no longer in contact with Zak or the crew. His social media took a hard turn in what is claimed in the documentary to be an obsession with the occult, and he tattooed the number 666 on both of his hands. Dr. Barry Taft continues to have health problems that the doctors still have not been able to pinpoint. Zak, at this point, decides to do what was suggested to him by local officers early on, and he has the house completely demolished. But, our homeboy could not help himself. A few of the relics, including the basement stairs, some of the dirt, and some of the things that were in the dirt, are now in his haunted mansion in Las Vegas. And which I have a friend that mocked something, especially in that room when we went on our tour. And when he returned home, he was experiencing really crazy things, including what was like a mimic in their house. And it really freaked him out, and they could not get it to go. No matter what, they tried so much stuff and they couldn't get this thing to leave. But I digress. What I found the most disturbing can actually be found in the Demon House, the lost footage episode that they put out after the movie. So stay tuned for another video, because I get why, I don't know why they didn't just make it one thing, but the lost footage had what I think was their most disturbing evidence in the whole entire thing. To close this up, when I was watching the documentary, and I've tried to record this before, but to close this up, when I was watching the documentary again and taking my notes, when it got to the part where they said that things started to affect Dr. Taff, I physically started feeling dizzy and uneasy and weird, and I had to stop several times while I was watching this to pray that anything not from God leave my home immediately. It's a feeling that lingered, kind of like a smoke, and it sat with me for a few days. I had this weird lightheaded but pressurized headache from the top of my head, and actually have it right now, but I think it's because I have a beanie on and I haven't been wearing one. And there was a point where I got weird pains in my right arm, but I just kept getting this pressure in my head as if I was getting the onset of a cold. And that night I tried to sleep with the lights off, and I couldn't. I was so incredibly jumpy. So I slept with the lights on for probably about 4 nights. And after tonight, I probably am gonna have to go back to it. And the weirdest thing that has happened to me after working on this, we've never had issues in our home here with flies. And yeah, it's summertime. It could just be that. But flies keep showing up around our house, and it's really freaking weird. There's one that was hanging out in the living room and kitchen. There's one that kept going in our bedroom. There was one in the bathroom. And it's rare. I think I've only seen one at a time, but they have been different flies. There's one downstairs, and then there was one in the refrigerator that I couldn't get out. And was one in my car. And I'm just gonna chalk it up to coincidence because I don't want to believe that it's because of anything weird, but it's been a little off-putting. So, thanks for watching. I know this was kind of all over the place. The documentary itself does a lot of jumping, but stay tuned. I want to talk about the lost footage episode, and I want to kind of go through the report from the hospital. So let me know what you thought about this, and after a couple more videos we'll move on from this. Are you bored of it? Let me know. Are you interested? Let me know. But thank you for coming, and stay safe. Namaste and good night, and surround yourself in light, and anything that is bad, that is not of your God, that is not of good, and beauty and love and light must be gone from this place, from our heads, from our hearts, from our homes, in our Holy Father's name.